All right, we are going to start technical session number 39. Those of you Mac owners out there, this is your day to shine. I never spend an awful lot of time focusing in on Windows. That's only because they're the majority of the market. But there are others out there that we need to pay attention to and be aware of as we work through IT. And at least have a basic understanding of how to navigate, know what we're looking at, and how to guide customers to the solutions that they need. Big two we'll be focusing on in this particular technical session will be Mac and Linux. All right. So the objectives for this particular technical session that we'll be going through will be to explain the purpose and context for knowing how to navigate other operating systems, including macOS, Linux, and mobile operating systems. We do have a whole other technical session specifically for mobile operating systems. This will just be a general overview that we go through today. Also, compare and contrast features and functionalities of the macOS and the Linux operating systems in general. Behavior skills and mindsets that we need to take into account while going through this technical session. Big one would be adaptability, especially for those of us who have operated on Windows for the majority of our time working with computers, because we're now going to have to learn another system, be it Linux or Mac. And a growth mindset. There's always more to learn, and we need to pursue that with vigor. We need to understand that to be successful in IT, we need to be interested in IT and all the aspects of it. All right, this chart here should look relatively familiar. We went over it yesterday to a little more general degree. This big blue section of the pie chart here, that would be Windows 10, takes up about 41% of the overall marketplace out there. And then not too far behind it, you got 37% roughly with Windows 7, 8, and 8.1 take up even smaller chunks of the market. But when you start incorporating all of that stuff together, you're getting into like the high 80s, even low 90s with regards to Windows operating systems on computers. Then your next biggest player will be your Mac OS, which is around 9.42%. And finally, your Linux users, which are around 2% roughly. But they also are the majority when it comes to servers and web servers and systems like that as well. So just understand, for the most part, Windows is the big dog in the market, but there are others out there that we need to be aware of and how to use them. All right, other operating systems that have grown in popularity over the last few years, especially Mac over the last 10 to 15 years. They were very minor players in the marketplace for quite some time, and typically were used predominantly for computer programmers, graphics designers, and things of that nature. Animators used them a lot. Excuse me. And then Mac, and then Mac started to change in popularity, I would say in the early aughts, and have continued to grow in market share and popularity over time. Then you have the Linux operating system. It's an open source operating system used by typically IT and computer programmers as well. Yes, Jimmy.
So just curious, for what reasons would graphic designers and such prefer Linux?
They had higher resolutions, I think, at the time, as well as a broader range of fonts for their type. So when you're in graphics design, you want, these guys like hoard fonts. They'll have like 20, 30,000 different types of fonts on their system at any given time. Yeah. And for that reason, Mac had a lot more access to that, and so they were predominantly used in those spaces.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so following slides, as we are moving forward, we will kind of identify some of the common features of these two major operating systems outside of Windows and functionality. We're going to talk about some best practices, tools, features, and then we're going to get into some basic Linux command line interface. But in there, it is called the terminal instead of the command prompt. So we will start to dive into that a little bit. I know we haven't got into command line for Windows yet, but we will. So for this, we will start giving you some basic commands you can work with. All right. Linux is broken down into what are called distros or distributions. It is open source software, so you do have a bunch of people out there that kind of create their own versions of it and will actually sell you maintenance packages on them where they will kind of update these things for you. But one of the requirements of Linux is if you're going to utilize their code, you need to publish your code so that the community can continue to grow and develop and become more efficient and effective and things like that. So yes, it is an open source, meaning the source code is published. So anybody can go in and read the source code on how they wrote that program. Windows is a proprietary code, meaning no, you are not allowed to see their code. They try to hide that and keep it from you. Yes, Luis.
I got a question. So, since they have their own different versions of Linux or Linux, I don't know how to pronounce it well. Am I able to make my own version of Linux?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
You just can't sell it.
You can sell maintenance on it.
Yeah, but you can't sell
but you have to allow people to download it for free. Interesting question to pose to the crowd with regards to security programs. Which do you think would be better and more secure, an open source program or a closed source program?
Close.
Okay, I've got a couple closed.
Alan, what do you
open.
think?
I'm gonna go with open just because it's like it'd be easier to see, like if you hire somebody to hack your system, you're like it'll have to be open for them to do it so you can see what the hackers are doing.
Not necessarily. You could grant them access to the proprietary code. So you can grant people access. So, but you're on the right path there, Alan. Yes, Chris.
Would it be open source because the more people are able to go into it and make changes to it and make it more secure?
You are right there. It's not so much that people can go in and make changes, it's that people can go in and test the viability of that security. So, you in a closed system, if I make a system and then I have Marvin test it, well, that's great. I know that system is good at keeping Marvin out, but it may not be great.
Or can it keep me out? Or
but it may not be great at keeping Avery out. But I don't know that because I didn't, test it with, a bunch of different people. So you'll have security systems that will go out there and basically they'll put out bounties like, if you can crack our system, we'll give you $500,000. And there are computer programmers and hackers out there that's all they do. Is they look for vulnerabilities in systems and then they will sell patches to the companies that have these systems and say, hey, here's how I got in, here's how you can fix it. And then these companies will pay them essentially bounties for preventing that problem in the future. So yes, Justin.
I was gonna go with open because of the fact that like you said, it has the ability for ethical hackers to go in. They can put that bounty out for ethical hackers. But also to me, it's like, it seemed like the source code or the software or the code would change so much because it's open source. It's never like a one way in or couple way in, couple way out or deals as with a licensed program because it's always probably changing.
But another way to think of it, I like where you're going with that, Justin. But another way to think about it with the open source is you may know how a safe is built, but it doesn't get you any closer to knowing the combination.
I really like that analogy, by the way.
So, I mean, that's where the open source code is. It allows you to test, you know, the limits of these programs to see how secure they actually are. So closed source security systems tend to not be as secure in the aggregate. There may be individual cases where they are, but as a whole, they're not as widely trusted because of that fact. All right, so listed below here, continuing on, you have some of the most common distros or distributions that are out there for Linux. The overwhelmingly most common would be Ubuntu, and then you have Fedora, Debian, Red Hat, Mint, Knoppix, Elementary OS, SUSE, and so on. And then in the security fields, there are free versions of Linux like Black Arch and Kali, which are really heavily used in security fields and are used for testing, doing penetration tests on systems to see if their security is up to snuff. So there is a pretty wide variety of types of Linux, but they are built off of the same open source code and infrastructure. All right. Mac OS versions. Initially, they started out with the big cats, starting with Cheetah, then moving up, to, Puma, Jaguar, Panther, Tiger, all the way up as far as they can go. Interestingly, they went Lion and then Mountain Lion. I don't know why, because, Lion's bigger than a mountain lion, but I guess they needed another one to add to it. And then they started going with mountain ranges now, and they're all the way up to Big Sur, I think at this point is what they're on currently. And they've mentioned where they're going after. It might be national parks, but with this one, they were going with mountain ranges. All right. Next, operating system maintenance. Not too dissimilar from normal operating system maintenance, but we want to be able to understand how it's done on these other systems. We want to know how to do scheduled backups, disk maintenance, system updates, and app stores where we can get other applications to attach to our systems, patch management, firmware updates, antivirus and anti-malware updates. All right. On Linux, you can back up the data. It can be scheduled using the rsync utility from the command line or terminal. And it can operate locally and remotely while encrypting the transfer if you're doing it remote. And as with almost any command line utility, you can create batch files and schedule these backups so that they are taking place during times of low traffic rather than doing them during your normal business cycles. Also, the tar and Scipio command line utilities are also used to construct full and partial backups. I believe there is a lab for this in Coursera. If not, in TestOut. TestOut has some pretty good Linux labs as well. All right, on the Mac OS, you can use the rsync utility as well in the terminal, but the Time Machine utility backs up the entire Mac, and it looks like a little clock with a rewind symbol on it down in the dock at the bottom of your screen. Now, in order for this to be viable, the Time Machine must be enabled first, and then it can automatically do backups however you want, hourly, monthly, weekly, daily, however you want to set them up. Obviously, the first backup will be the longest, and then after that, it will go a little faster. This utility requires booting to a different drive, not a drive local or internal to the Mac itself. You need to have a separate drive to export the data to. Questions so far with regards to this? All right. There we go. Disk maintenance.
Kelly, I'm sorry. Can I,
Yeah, good.
the previous slide,
Yep.
it said something about that you have to use a different drive in order to.
Yes. For Time Machine specifically. So when you set up Time Machine for a Mac, you need to have a second drive outside the computer or another drive that you're going to be backing up your files to. That way, if the drive internally in the computer goes bad, you have a full backup.
And that could be like a flash drive.
Technically, yes, but you may not have the space. Hold on one second.
Justin, do you have a question?
Yes, so like when you're backing up on a separate drive, isn't that where your like your RAD would come in handy? Am I saying that right? Like if you're mirroring with RAD or basically like your if you're duplexing with RAD, wouldn't that be used for that kind of scenario? If you had more than
Doesn't have to be, but it can. I get what you're saying. It's a backup. So the whole purpose of having some of those RAID technologies, depending on what you go with, is for speed, and it also for redundancy. So if you do have something set up to back up, this is going to allow you to, of course, back it up. And if one of those drives fail, you'll have a duplicate file of it in that redundant RAID setup. So Justin, you're right. It can be utilized here. It can. But is that's the need? That's not directly the need for it, but it for sure can be utilized here.
So when I think RAD, I really need to be thinking performance.
Well, it's
no, not necessarily.
But then it's also redundancy. Like it's up to you. It's what you have going on. Let's give an example really quickly. Really, this is a real example. Oh man, let me
pause it. That's good. All right, so scheduling your disk maintenance. You have X3 and X4, and they're common systems to Linux, and they do not require defragmentation. I believe the way the file system is in Linux, it does not require defragmenting, the way that they set up their filing systems. There is a file system checker, which will check your files as well, which you can enter into the command line itself. There is a lab in TestOut that you will be doing that will require you to do this as well. In Apple, they have the APFS, which also does not require defragmentation. And then you can check the health of your hard drive, which is the Disk Utilities Verify disk, and that will perform a verification of your hard drive to make sure that it is still operating in a healthy manner. And if there are errors developing on that hard drive, which does occur over time, they can help fix these errors, much like File System Checker. Question. All right. System updates. Now, in Linux OS, it's a little more involved. You can use the traditional command line, or you can go through a GUI tool in Ubuntu and Fedora. So they do have update tools in those two particular distros. But they also have the command line where you can do the updates as well. It's through the command line. You can check and see if any updates are available, and then go ahead and download them as you need. You could use the command sudo apt-get update, and that will go through and look for updates for your Linux system. And sudo is a command you will see used regularly, and that is super user do once. So it's like basically making yourself an administrator in order to carry out a command a single time. So you have sudo or sudo, so super user do once. There's also su, which is super user, but I believe that function remains on until you turn it off. So it's much more prudent to use sudo so that you don't accidentally leave that function turned on. Mac OS, significantly easier. You have the App Store, which provides the apps directly. It will send notifications through the system, much like Microsoft Windows does. Say, hey, these applications are out of date. Please go ahead and update them as you have time. Here are the things that we're updating, so you can take a look at them. You can have it done automatically, where it just goes ahead and runs the updates for you in your software update preferences, or you can set it to where it notifies you, and then you choose whether or not to run those updates yourself. I highly recommend that with Mac going forward, since they are now basically saying they're granting themselves access to all your photos. If people did not catch that one this last week.
Yeah, child porn check.
Do you honestly think that's the only thing they're going to use that for? That's the gateway. Think of the children. Give us access. But a lot of people are not thrilled with how they're going about this. So, patch management and driver firmware updates within the Linux and Mac ecosystems. In Windows, they have a tool, system checker and configuration manager that allows you to use it. They have third-party applications as well that can be downloaded in order to manage this for yourself. Driver and firmware updates within the Linux operating system. It varies based on the version, as do a lot of the commands we talk about. The majority of them surround Ubuntu, because that is the most common. Yeah, that's probably it, Avery. So I can always tell when Avery's done something bad. You look over and his face is like purple because he's like laughing so hard. All right. So in Linux, the process varies by the distro you're using. So during and after installation, you can update through the Software Update Center, or use the Personal Package Archive, PPA, which are repositories containing the drivers and stuff like that used by the Ubuntu distro itself. You can update this through the RPM package, which is in the Red Hat version. I believe the PPA one for Ubuntu, you will perform a lab in Coursera in order to do updates on applications that you are currently running. So they do have an app for, or they do have a lab for that. And I believe they also have a lab in Test Out that does the same thing. All right, firmware and driver updates are obtained directly from the Apple Store or site and will be pushed based on the firmware that you are currently using. So it's a little bit closer to the Windows system with regards to Mac, and they're pushing those updates to you. Linux, you have to go out and regularly and collect them. All right, antivirus and anti-malware updates. All right, time to debunk the biggest lie in the industry. Macs are not immune to viruses. The biggest reason why Macs didn't get a lot of viruses is there weren't a lot of them out. You what?
Let's see if they know. They may
All right.
know.
Well, Let's see. All right. There's two main reasons.
Someone answer. Why do you think Max had that particular name or status attached to it as being virus proof? What do you think that was? Go for it. Go for it. Go for it, Luis. Then we'll get Justin.
Marketing, you know, they just want to literally convince people that, you know, they're immune from viruses.
But they weren't even actually doing the convincing. It was more so just the talk of the town based off of Windows seeing so much traffic when it came towards viruses and Mac's not seeing as much. So they didn't have to push it. It was being pushed on their behalf. They just didn't stop it. But I like where your mind is, Luis. What you say, Justin?
I think when it comes to that, I think Mac had that kind of step on them because they were so protective of their cloud. Like they didn't sell or they didn't contract out with any other companies the way Windows did as far as businesses at the time. It was like if it was Apple, Apple was just for Apple.
Hey man, you're dancing in the place that we want you to be. You're just not saying exactly what I want you to say, but you're close, Justin. What you got, Alan?
Is it because there wasn't a lot of Apple computers out there? For them to get the, like, you got to have different type of virus. They might not run on Windows, but it may run on Windows, but it may not run on Apple or Mac OS.
Ding, 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 ding. That's one. Kelly, I'm gonna let you address the second one, but that is one. Good job on that, Alan.
Yeah, so if you think about the market share that's out there, if you're going to spend the time to build a virus to try to hack people's systems to gain money, resources, whatever information, you want to be able to cast the widest net possible, right? So am I going to write a virus to attack machines that only take up 2 to 3% of the marketplace? Or am I going to write a virus that's going to attack 90% of the computers in the workplace or in the environment? So that's where that kind of comes into play, because the vast majority of computer users are Windows, as well as the overwhelming majority of businesses use Windows. So that's the first one. The second one is the way Macs install code. When they are transmitting and installing code, they do checks before and after, and they run it in line by line. So if the line doesn't match what's supposed to come in, it does a hard stop and refuses to go any further. So that makes it not impossible, but more difficult to get a virus onto a Mac. The way Windows does it is they're going for speed and pure speed only. So it's packets coming in for all different sections, and they're throwing it all together like a puzzle, and they don't know till the very end if they're missing pieces or pieces are out of whack or anything like that. So it gives a virus a better chance to actually integrate itself and get in that way. Yes, Alan.
Is that the reason why you have to jailbreak your phone, jailbreak your Apple phone to get like third-party apps? Because it's like the code that goes through, like it won't. Does that make sense or no?
Well, in order to get into the App Store, you have to fulfill certain requirements. And the jailbreaking of your phone allows you to bypass that. On an Android, it's already set up where you can go into developer mode and sideload apps into it, no problem. But this is basically creating that environment for yourself on an Apple. And if you do that, you're voiding any warranty that you may or may not have had on the phone. If you don't have any warranty on the phone, have fun, do whatever you want with it. You can set it up however you wish. So. All right. Now, both Linux and Mac actually have antivirus software that you can use on their systems. They're just, variations of what you would see on a Windows machine. But like we were saying, predominantly throughout its history, hackers did not attack Mac users because there just wasn't enough there. Well, now you're starting to see a lot more people in that market space So it's becoming more of a viable target for hackers, especially when you know the vast majority of hackers are focusing on Windows. You might be able to be a big fish in a small pond and have a lot more luck attacking Macs. So in the last 5-10 years, you're starting to see a lot more virus attacks on Macs themselves. Now, yes, Rienzi.
What about the ones when you get that Windows for Mac operating system? Does that make you then more vulnerable to the same kind of viruses because you have that, like, I don't know, dual system, or you have that, you know what I'm talking about? How they have,
If you do like the dual boot and you have like 2 different operating systems.
well, you have that Windows for Mac. I got that for my computer. Does that mean that you're not vulnerable to the same viruses that they are?
Not necessarily, because the Windows for Mac would be giving you Mac or Windows applications on a Macintosh. They would still have to program it to the architecture of Mac. It's not changing your computer's coding to be like Windows, which is where the vulnerabilities are being attacked. So they still would need to attack as if it was a Mac to get in the door. Good question, though. Any other questions? All right.
Kelly, you want me to take over?
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Let me go ahead and stop share right here.
All right, can everyone see my screen? Thumbs up if you can. All right. All right. So now we're going to be talking about some differences between the macOS and Linux systems. We're going to be talking about backups versus time machine, restore versus snapshot, image recovery, disk maintenance utilities, the shell and terminal, screen sharing, and force quitting. All right, so backup or time machine for the Linux operating system. Backup tools are available for all versions using the tar and Scipio command line utilities to construct full or partial backups. Each utility contains a large file that archives other files. So different options that we have here. We have our append, which is -r, our concatenate -a, create -c, we have delete, our diff/d, extract, help, list, and update. So the append command appends files to an archive. The concatenate adds one or more archives to the end of existing archives. The create creates a new archive, makes sense. Delete will delete files in an archive, not on tapes. Diff will compare files in an archive with disk files. Extract will extract the files. Help displays a list of different tar options. And list lists the files in an archive. Update is like the R option, but the file is not if a newer version is already in the archive. So you won't use these two with us. You'll use this at a very basic level, most likely. There will be other commands that we'll need to pick up. Kelly, would you mind reading this next slide for me?
A backup time machine, macOS,
Yes, please.
schedule
be-
backups. Schedule backups are performed using the tool Time Machine. You turn it on, it can keep your hourly backups for the past 24 hours, daily backups for the past month, and weekly backups for the previous months. Oldest backups are deleted when your disk becomes full.
So Macs use Time Machine. What does Windows use? What would be the Windows equivalent?
Feel free to use the chat.
Is it the notifications?
The restore point.
Check them out. Check out Umberto.
Yes, I said the restore points.
Yeah, I heard you. You did. You said it well. that was the answer I was looking for. Good job on that, Pozo. As you will learn, in which rightfully so, Windows will have a nearby equivalent, or vice versa, since Windows is the biggest on the market. A Mac will have a equivalent to a application that will also be used on Windows. So just keep that in mind, and we will have a way to compare those two going forward.
Thank you, Marvin. All right, so restore and snapshot for Linux operating systems. Snapshot provides a volume image of a device at a particular instant without causing a service interruption, and then it can be restored. So to restore the snapshot, we would run the IV convert command. And is it IV or LV, Kelly and or Marvin? I can't remember off the top of my head.
LV, I think.
I think that's right.
I think it's LV, yeah.
LV,
I think
yep.
LS, LV, LS.
There will be times where the L's will look like I's and also will look like ones. So got to be on the lookout for
Agreed.
that. So to restore, you'll run the LV convert command and the -s argument of the LV create command to create a snapshot. For the Mac operating system, we're going to restore, for restoring files are performed using the tool Time Machine by following these steps. You're going to select the Time Machine icon from the menu. You can also search for the Time Machine in your Finder, and it'll pull that up for you. You select Enter Time Machine. You'll be taken to the Time Machine window, and from there you can navigate to the file or folder you need to retrieve. So step 4, you'll locate the file or folder and click the Restore button, and then Time Machine will copy that file to its original location on your hard drive. Any questions on that? Time Machine's pretty easy to navigate, so if you get a chance to look at it, should be easy to go through. All right, image recovery. Both systems can recover an image using the same techniques as restoring a single file. Below are the methods for recovering the whole image. So for Linux, recovery of the image can be done using the rsync utility to restore the entire snapshot. And for Mac, recovery is done through the disk utility along with the backup of the system and the OS media. So that's for restoring the full image. Right. So our disk maintenance tool, disk utility. Disk utility performs disk-related tasks on Mac operating systems, including the creation, conversion, compression, and encryption of disks. Both systems can recover an image using the same techniques as restoring a single file. And below are some methods for recovering the whole image. So you can use the rsync tool, which backs up and stores files. The time machine also backs up and restores files and images. FSCK, FSCheck, file system checker. Disk utilities. This will verify the disk health and can restore images. The tar tool, which will back up files, and LV create creates a snapshot volume. So good to know what these tools do, because it's very likely you'll see them on your tests. They'll ask you, they'll want to know if you know what these different tools are and what they're used for. Any questions, concerns? Alan's bored of this. He's just tired. All right, let's move on then. Now the shell and terminal, getting into the fun stuff. So for Linux, it's the rain there. It's raining pretty hard here too, TK. I feel you. For Linux, the command line interface is usually reached through a terminal session. So in Linux, it's called terminal. So in this terminal session, this is where we interact with the shell, and that's the interpreter between the user and operating system. So this is where you would enter your commands to perform different tasks. And the most popular shell for Linux today is known as Bash. And the terminal will appear when pressing Control-Alt-T. So if you're in Linux, you hit Control-Alt-T, it'll pull up something similar to what you see under the Mac OS, but it might not be color coordinated. So for Mac OS, the shell is called terminal and can be accessed by going to Finder, Devices, Applications, Utilities, Terminal. Kelly, do you want to open up your terminal since you have Mac device? So they can see what it looks like.
Yeah, give me a second here.
Might as well make use of your Mac.
Eh.
Eh.
There we go. So here it is right here.
So that's what it'll look like.
Not too dissimilar from the command line in Windows. And some of the many of the commands are similar as well, but there are some notable differences because it's going to be closer to it's built off the Unix platform, so it'll be closer to Linux.
Yes, Renzi.
I said Bash was for Linux, and I thought you said you had Mac. So so your Mac also has Bash.
Yes, the shell that Mac is built on is a Unix platform, much like Linux is built off of the Unix platform as well. So they share many of the same commands.
But not all commands.
Not all, but many.
Hmm.
But good catch, Renzi.
All right, screen sharing. So for Linux, sharing screens with others can be done through third-party tools or following the procedures as a root user. So you can change permissions to allow users to get added to the session by typing chmod or chmod space u+s/usr bin or /bin/screen, which allows a user to run an executable file of the specific owner who is launching. You can change the access permissions of the screen mode by typing chmod 755/var/run/screen. Log out from SSH as a root user. Then you will type the command screen to start the new screen. Change the screen mode from single user to multi-user. Press Control A and type multi-user on. Add the user into the screen in case the user is Jack. Press Control plus A and then type the name /x eclad Jack. The user joins the screen so that both can work in the same terminal by typing screen-x name of screen session. Or you can use Zoom.
Right.
And share your screen.
Much better, right?
So instead of learning all of this, you could use a third-party app that will make your life significantly easier.
Significantly easier.
I did not experience any questions about this during my exams. Marvin or Kelly, is that similar to your experience?
Yeah, I never got any of these, but if you get into the Linux Plus for CompTIA,
you can see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But at the moment, this is above your pay grade. So I wouldn't stress over knowing how to share your screen through Linux. For Mac, it's built into the Mac OS and it'll enable you to share your screen with others. While your screen is shared, the user of the other computer sees what you see and they can open, move, close files, as well as restart your system. It requires a VNC or virtual network computing connection client. Any questions? All right, Kelly, can you talk about force quit for 1 second?
Force quit, useful command. In applications, sometimes applications get hung up and don't want to close out. So we want to force quit them. You can do this in Windows, you can do this in Linux, and you can do it in Mac. We will talk about it in Windows when we start getting into command line, but it's not going to be too dissimilar to the command line you see here with regards to Linux operating system. First, you need to find out what the PID is for that particular application. And that can go down to a very specific window. So like, say you have 30 instances of Google open for some odd reason, Marvin, and you want to close out just one of them because it's frozen up. You can actually look up the PID for the specific one that is hung up and then kill that particular application with the kill command in Linux. Or you could, excuse me, and then to quickly open the terminal in Linux, you hit the Control-Alt-T, and that quickly opens up your terminal there. Now in Mac OS, as it is predominantly GUI, you could use the command option escape in order to force quit that particular application if it is not working itself. First, you try to quit it, and then if it doesn't quit at that point, then you can opt for the command opt escape. Although down in the dock in the bottom, if you try to quit it 3 times, it will automatically give you the option to force quit if you so choose. So,
Who can tell us what the equivalent of this is for Windows?
even though we haven't gone over it yet.
Task manager.
Control Alt Delete. Pull
That's
up
a
the
way to
task
get.
manager in there and then close it.
I was thinking, you're right.
Luis, do you want to add?
Isn't it Alt F4?
In the GUI sense, yeah, that would do it. That would kill the window you were in.
Yep.
So that's one way to do it. And then there is anybody know what the command line is? The command for it?
Oh, it's the kill, I believe.
What did you say?
Kill. The command
Close.
kill.
Close. That's for Linux. The kill command.
Terminate.
A little colder, but on the same path. We haven't done it yet, so we're not gonna. We haven't gone over the command line yet, so we're not gonna torture you about it too much.
Yeah.
The command is task kill.
I have a task, I need to kill it. Task.
So task kill.
Good job, guys. All right, so some macOS features. We have multiple desktops under mission control, and this can be used to switch between apps and desktops called workspace switchers in Linux. We also have the keychain, which is a password management system. So that'll keep track of all your passwords if you would like to use that. Spotlight is a useful tool where you can search for documents, images, apps, and more. iCloud for a small, you have a small amount that's free, but anything beyond that requires payment. Marvin pays 99 cents a month. Is that correct?
This is correct. 99 cents for 30 gigs, 20 to 30 gigs.
Yep. So pretty reasonable if
Not for me.
not for Kelly, but
I don't
for
like
the
any
average person.
payment thing though. Abram, I'm not a fan of just paying just to pay.
Well,
Like, go for
so
it.
if you have used up all your space or a lot of your space on your actual drives and you don't have the money to go buy a new hard drive, 99 cents a month for 30 gigs isn't terrible. You know, that gives you some time to go get an alternative storage
It's
space.
just the fact that it's like money leaking. It's like a
Yes.
slow leak, and I don't think I'm like, what's pulling on me? Something's pulling. I don't like.
Think of it almost like a gym membership. Like you sign up,
Yeah,
you never go, but you're like, I just got to get there and cancel it. I swear I'm going to start working out again 3 months later.
I would rather pay.
I did that for a year, Kelly.
I'd rather pay in full.
I agree. I'd rather pay a set amount to receive a set amount instead of paying subscriptions, but
Oh, everybody wants
It's-
those subscriptions
Yeah.
because we forget about them.
moving on.
All right. Well, real quick,
Okay.
let me share my screen here, Avery. I
Okay.
just want to give a quick view of emission control as to what it is really and it looks like. So let me go ahead and just share my desktop here. So everybody can see my desktop. And then to go to mission control, you make a gesture onto the touchpad and it brings you to an open count, an open grouping of everything. I can actually create multiple desktops up here. So I can add a desktop and say I have one desktop for my work stuff and one desktop for my personal stuff. And I can actually keep them fully segmented that way if I so choose. So that is like one of the benefits of mission control.
It's very handy for organization and to quickly see all of the things.
Yep.
We have gestures, touchscreen using multi-touch. You can also use multi-touch on the Mac mouses. So you can zoom in and out on things if you pinch and spread on the mouse. It's pretty cool. There's Finder, which allows you to browse through folders and files, disk, apps, and more. You've got remote disk, access files on a disk in another machine. The dock, which is a set of icons that, so when Kelly shared his screen, all of those apps and stuff and icons at the bottom of the screen, that's his dock. And then we also have Boot Camp, which allows you to choose the operating system as you boot. So you can have multiple operating systems. Any questions, concerns? TK says she's under a tornado warning. If you have to dip, we understand. Please be safe. Your safety is more important than the remainder of this lesson.
Hey man, these other operating systems are pretty yeah, safety is more, you're right, Amer. Exactly right.
All right, so some basic Linux commands. Marvin, do you already have these images ready to share? Or do we need to? Because I think I got them from you. I can't remember if I took the pictures myself or if you shared them.
I don't have these. I will make these. You just do your thing.
All right, so these next 4 slides are going to be basic Linux commands that you will be using throughout this course, and it'll be important that you know them for the CompTIA exam and for some of the Coursera, I believe during the power users course. So it is important that you know these. I recommend making flashcards so you can kind of get used to seeing them. There are also a ton of really good tests that make use of command prompt and the Linux commands. And that was my best tool for learning how to use these, because when you're actually using them, you see how they work and what they directly do, instead of just memorizing that CD changes the current directory. Actually typing CD and the directory you want will take you to that directory, and it's more visual. So I recommend doing those labs over and over again because they will help exponentially. So our basic Linux commands, I'm going to go through them really quickly, and Marvin will add these photos into the chat. So feel free to download them or take the pictures yourself, write them down, do whatever will help you the most. So command name, CD, that changes the current directory because you can create in one directory at a time. Chmod changes your file permissions. Chown changes the file owner and group. CP copies your files. ls will display the contents of a directory or list the directory. Mkdir or make directory is create a directory.
Say that again for me. Say that again for me, Avery. MK what?
Dir
There.
dir or make directory. That's why you'll hear people just say make directory instead of mkdir
I
because it
like that.
sounds funny. So make directory, create a directory, move mv, rename a file and move the file from one directory to another. rm, remove, delete files. pwd, print working directory, not password. It is important to know the difference because they will try to trick you with that one. Well, they won't try to trick you. They want to make sure that you know the difference between printing your working directory and changing your password. All right. So our second slide of these, we have DD, which copies blocks of data from one file to another. And this is used to copy data from devices. We have our grep command, which allows you to search for regular expressions in a text file. So that allows you to, you could search for any file that has the word cat in it. And so it'll pull up all the files within that directory that have cat within it, that text file. We have our apt-get command, which downloads files from a repository site. So that's how we update, download files. PS displays a list of current running processes. Shutdown will shut down Linux. And Vi starts the visual file editor. So that's how you go in and edit files. Our third page, password. So this is how you change your password. Pass WD. In the chat, who can tell me how we print our directories? Nice, PWD, exactly. So PWD, print working directory. Pass WD is to change your password. So just remember that pass is associated with password and PWD, print working directory. And then we have SU or SU. This starts a new shell as another user. The other user is assumed to be the root user when the command is invoked without any argument. So that's how our root is our administrator account. So that's how we do all the things that we need higher clearance for. It is a good idea to use sudo when you're trying to do those things though. This means super user do once. And it's good practice to limit the amount of root access you're allowing.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Super user do once. Super user do once. And then SU is just super user. So once you type in sudo and whatever commands that follow, it'll run it as an administrator or your root user. And then after that, it'll go back to the regular user. So that way they just can't continue to do things as an administrator. All right, and then our final one, we have our whose actions and permissions. So U stands for user, G stands for group, O stands for others, A stands for all. So Ugo A. Those are our who's. Our actions are going to be plus, minus, equal to, or S. Plus means add, minus remove, equal is to assign, S is going to be set user ID. And then finally we have our permissions. So read, write, execute, R, W, X. Any questions?
This will make a lot of sense when we do some little exercises. I know you'll see it. It's gonna show up in Coursera, correct, Avery? I'm sure.
Yes,
Yeah,
that'll show up during the power users course, but there are a ton of great labs and test out that make use of these. Highly, highly, highly recommend you do them. All right, now we have a little quiz. 5 questions. All right, which of the following application stores are compatible with iOS? That is our App Store. So the App Store is for Apple operating systems or iOS. Maybe that's not what's happening. Maybe I was wrong. All right, in a Linux operating system environment, what command will display the current directory to the user? That is print working directory or PWD. What is the name of the area at the bottom of a Mac OS X screen where by default a car of crucial icons appears? That is our dock. Taskbar is going to be for Windows. And number 4, which Linux command can be used to let you run a single command as another user? Sudo or super user do once. SU will hold that administrative power. Pass WD, it's going to be change your password. I don't know what the
If it would have said as an administrator, I probably would have got that right.
Yeah, it'll say it as another user. I believe you can do like sudo or su and then type another user's information out and run it as that user instead of the root user. But by default, it'll run it as a default or the root user.
So the answer is A, sudo or?
Sudo. Yep. Super user do once.
Okay.
All right. And last one, which Linux utility can be used to check and repair disk? This is going to be our FSCK, file system checker. All right. And so this lab sim will take you directly to the labs that are associated with this session. Highly recommend you do them. They will be very, very beneficial to you. All right, our objectives are revisited. We should be able to explain the and context for knowing how to navigate other operating systems, including macOS, Linux, and mobile operating systems. And we should also be able to compare and contrast features and functionalities of the macOS and Linux operating system. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? If not, I will hand it off to Kelly.
All right.